So I work at a small consulting company up in Cleveland called DI. We're a team of 3 developers, 4 designers, and as one of the senior developers there, I tend to get thrown a lot of random tasks. Some of them are pretty small random tasks. Things like, can you invite this user to our app? Can you deploy this? Does anyone else have to deal with these kinds of questions? These kinds of things? And it's like, we don't really have time to automate these things right now, but they still take out chunks of our time. And so I'd been thinking for a while, it'd be really great if I could have an app that would help me track this stuff, so then I could have some objective numbers to put around, how much time I'm spending on these random tasks. And then we can talk about, okay, this is taking, over the past few months, this is taking an hour. It'll take me a half hour to automate it. Net win, right? So, but as things go, I didn't really have a whole lot of time to work on it. And then Apple had to go and announce Swift. And I was like, finally, the perfect excuse to try building this little app. And so I started building this app I call Punch Cards, and essentially you can have a card for each one of these little tasks that you have to automate, and you can punch it. And each time you punch it, it tells you, it increments the number of punches. And then you can see over a period of time how often was I punching this card. And give me a better sense for how much time are we spending on these little things. When I built this, I wanted to play with Swift. I didn't want to write a Rails app. I didn't want to write server-side code. And so I decided I'd heard about their support of the Ember community, so I decided to try out Firebase. If you haven't heard about Firebase, it's a key value store product that has libraries for most of the client-side tech stacks, including iOS. But so in this iOS app, all the data loading, all the display logic, all the rendering, everything is handled on the client. So what I was building is what we know of as a native iOS app. But like I said, all the data loading, everything was happening on the client, and I realized, wait, this is how I build Ember apps. And I realized what I'm building when I'm building an Ember app is really could be called a native web app. So I kind of made up this term to describe a particular style of building an app, because I feel like building an Ember app is different than the traditional way that we're used to building with JavaScript, especially when you get into something like Ember CLI. And I couldn't really find a good term to put to this, so I made one up. And this is how I define it. A native web app is an app that uses the browser and its APIs as its only means for rendering templates and changing URLs. And it can replace or supplement iOS apps, and it can replace or supplement desktop apps. So this is a great app. I want to build Ember apps like this. So then the next question that comes into play is, well, should I actually be building a native web app, or is server-side good enough? And that slide's not supposed to be there, but is server-side good enough? And I kind of thought through some of the reasons why server-side might not be good enough for you. And these are some of the things that I came up with. So maybe, in my case, all my data was coming from a third-party API. Maybe your data structure and your presentation are very different. You might have many clients connecting to multiple backends. So like what we used to call fat client apps. You might be supplementing a native app for another platform, and a number of other reasons. And there's some more subtle reasons that you might want to build a native web app. So let's talk about how we build them. So in most native environments, you have a framework of some sort that you can use to build your apps. For iOS, we have Cocoa Touch. For Windows, we have things like WPF. There's a plethora of choices for the web. Okay. I mean, yeah, I guess there's also some of these, but really? And native desktop apps typically have some sort of build tool, right, to help you automate compiling, packaging, deploying, things like that. And this is just some of the build tools that we have for other environments. Things like Rake or Visual Studio or Xcode. And I put the Rails command in here for anyone who does Rails. because Ember CLI is actually highly influenced by the Rails command. So what does a build tool for native web apps look like? These are some of the things that I thought of that a build tool should have. If you look at anything like Brunch or Gulp, there are plugins to help you accomplish most of these tasks. So you need to be able to initialize a project blueprint. You need to be able to pre-process things like CoffeeScript or whatever your alt.js language might be, or Sass. You need to be able to serve a development build for debugging that's not minified and that maybe has source maps built into it. You need to be able to automatically rebuild files or rebuild the app when files change, and that needs to be fast, I might add. And it's nice to have generators that help you, that generate blueprints for you. But why don't we have a great build tool like this for web apps? The problem is that every project is different. Anyone who's done Angular, what are the conventions for building an Angular app? You could find some blog posts where somebody says, this is how we do it, but there's no real set of clear best practices for building these kinds of apps. But Ember embraces convention over configuration, and the idea that a strong set of conventions makes us more productive. So with Ember, we don't have to worry about those problems of every project being different, because every project is structured the same. So then we get to ask the fun question. And my laptop's sliding off here. That would be really bad. It's like the lip is just going up over this. So then we get to ask the fun question, what would an Ember-specific build tool look like? Well, an Ember-specific build tool should give you something that's ready to build, because Ember is all about being productive right away. It should enforce the same directory structure, because Ember is all about convention over configuration and giving you the places to put things so that you don't have to think about the structure of your app. Ember's about best practices, and globals suck. Globals are hard because they make oh cool, thank you. They make wrapping your head around, like bringing somebody new into a code base, finding where things are. Globals make that really hard, because you'd never know where functions to find, where to find certain things. It needs to be testing ready, because testing is important. So you need to be able to start writing and running your tests right away. It needs to be configurable, because convention over configuration does not mean convention not configuration. And it needs add-ons. It needs the ability to be able to say, I want to install IC tabs component and get tabs in your app. So I'm going to show an example here of actually creating an app with Ember CLI and what that looks like. You're going to be doing this to me the whole time. Okay. Okay, so can you guys see that okay? Kind of? If I start typing, should I make it bigger? Bigger and brighter? Is that better? Okay. So let me go to make sure I'm in the right folder here. Okay. So, all right, I'm going to go kill this directory and start over. So for the punch cards app I'm working on, if I wanted to start building a web app for it, from the directory I'm currently in, I could just type ember new. Well, I guess first to install it, you can npm install-g ember CLI, which I'm not going to do right now, but so then I can do ember new, and then whatever the name of your app is. So in this case, we're going to call it punch cards web. And you'll see that it created a bunch of stuff for me. So it created an entire directory structure. It even gave me a package JSON. It gave me a public folder, some tests. And now, if you can't read the bottom, it says that it's installing packages from npm. So it's automatically getting this thing all ready to run. And I tested this earlier and it worked pretty well. So this should work. I like to think that the test of a good Wi-Fi network is if you can npm install on it. And I was able to npm install here, so that was pretty good. All right, so now it's installing installing Bower packages. So it comes with Bower set up by default. If you're not familiar with Bower, it's a package manager for browser libraries. So like JavaScript and CSS kind of stuff. And is that good? I can't see the corner there, but I think that's done. So now we've got our app folder. And now if I want to get a preview server, I can just run Ember server. So it fires up on port 4200. So I could go to localhost 4200 here. And we have an Ember app, all set up, ready to run. And so this is a development-friendly Ember app, obviously. If I wanted to build a production version of the app, I could just run Ember build. And now if we look in our dist folder, we've got an assets folder that has our app in it. It uses the app name .js. So it gets everything all set up for you and ready to build. Yeah, thank you. It was pretty cool, huh? So, all right, let's talk a little bit about how these things work. So I mentioned that it needs to enforce the same directory structure. So the directory structure that we have there is we have an app folder, and the app folder is where you would put your application logic, things like your routes, your controllers, your views, the stuff you're used to putting under app. Also, the router goes there. And all the folders under app correspond to the Ember naming conventions that you're used to, which I'll go into more in a minute. There's a config folder for your app configuration. So that's where you would put things like the Ember env flags or feature flags, or if you have any app-specific configuration options, you can put them in there. Public is where you put static assets like images or fonts or anything that doesn't need to be processed. And then your tests are obviously for tests, which are run. So you can run I'll show you how to run tests in a minute, but they're run through Testum, which means that you can run them on your phone or you can run them from just about wherever. And then vendor is where third-party code goes and installed via Bower. Notice the word I used there, enforce the same directory structure. So this is a part of Ember CLI I think people have asked about the most, which is, glad I caught that. Which is, you know what, I'm going to do something crazy here. 1 second. I think I can see that. Okay. Oop. Microphone. Okay. So so how do modules work as opposed to globals? So with Ember, with the Ember naming conventions that you're used to, you have something like app.post route, and that corresponds to app is your namespace, post is the name of a thing, and route is the type of the thing, right? So with modules, we have AMD syntax. Note I said AMD syntax. It's not actually, Ember CLI doesn't actually do anything asynchronous when it comes to loading your code. It's just, we're just stealing the syntax. So the module that we just looked at will be defined this way. And so every module automatically gets wrapped in a closure so that you have local scope. And so let's break this down, how this works a little bit. So we have loader.js, which is a dependency that comes with Ember CLI. Loader.js gives us a define function that that basically registers our modules. When we call define, it registers each module with the loader. This is similar to how things like Almond.js works. The difference is loader.js is much simpler, much smaller, and it doesn't try to asynchronously load anything. It also supports cycles, which from what I hear, Almond does not, so that's kind of cool. So Ember then uses this structure to enforce the same sort of naming conventions that we're used to, only with the module name. So what happens is, let's say you have an array controller defined in a module, and it has an item controller called post. When that array controller when the container instantiates that array controller, it's going to then look up the post controller using this controller:post syntax. The container is going to ask itself, do I have this already? And if I do, just go ahead and return it. It's going to actually instantiate the object and return it. And if I don't, go find it, and it's going to ask the resolver for that, then create it, then return it. The resolver then knows how to look things up. So the resolver is going to actually concatenate the name into a path, and the code pretty much looks like this. Take the namespace name, which is blog, the pluralized type, which is controllers, and the name, and join them together with slashes. And then call require, which is given to us by loader, and that's going to inject the it's going to extract the the factory for the object from the module, and then it's going to return it back to the container, and then the container is going to return it back to the controller. So this is all possible thanks to the customizability of the Ember resolver. So what you're used to in Ember is actually controlled by the default resolver that comes with Ember out of the box, and that will do something like return blogapp.postController. The CLI resolver is another third-party library that Stefan wrote that will return require blog controllers post. So just to recap all that, when you say define, it injects the module into the loader's registry. When the container tries to look it up, it's going to ask the resolver for that to look up that module, and then when it tries to resolve it, it's going to require it to extract it from the registry. Make sense? Congratulations. That is how Ember naming conventions work. But you're probably thinking, do I have to type define all the time? AMD syntax sucks. Ember's all about productivity, right? So part of the ES6 specification is for having this module concept be part of the language. And so like in Node, you don't have to define modules. They're just automatically created for you. And it's the same way with the ES6 modules. So it's going to be part of the spec, but since it's going to take years and years for that to get into browsers, we've got a library we can use because we're awesome like that. I don't know. So how does that work? So the whole name of the module goes away because that could just be derived from the path, right? Your dependencies and the actual closure that you create that gets the dependencies handed in are replaced by an import statement. So this means that we have to import our dependencies explicitly, which is a little bit more work, but it's actually a good thing because that means anybody on your team who opens up a file can look at the top of the file and know exactly what they have access to at any given point in time. So this is what that code looks like using ES6 modules. I think I forgot to explain the return is replaced by export default. If you're interested, just Google. If you're interested in more, because there's a lot more to ES6 modules than I can cover here, I would recommend Googling it or look at the ES6 module transpiler on GitHub. There's some really cool stuff there. So then another part of our Ember build tool is it needs to be testing ready. So like I mentioned, we're currently using Testum to run the tests. It comes with QUnit and Ember QUnit by default. That's all of that is going to be the plan is to make that adaptable in the future, but that's right now, we're trying to start with some good defaults. Use Ember test -- serve to run your test server, and it will automatically run the tests using testum every time you change a file. If you want to be able to browse your app and manually test it at the same time that you're running your tests, which I often do, you need to run a development server separately. So I'm going to show an example, just a really quick example of writing a test with what that looks like in Ember CLI. And if you want to know more about Ember testing, the testing guide is excellent. And I think Katie's giving a talk on testing later today. So we have our app that we created, but we don't have any code in it yet. So I'm going to go ahead and generate a model. And I'm going to call it card. And I'm going to give it a, cool, thank you, good call. Card is going to have a number of punches on it. And whenever we punch the card, we'll just increment that number. Sound good? So I can say Ember generate model. Oh. Say model. What? Ember generate model. Oh, whoops. Good call. Yeah, I can't imagine it would know what I meant. There we go. So now we created app models card and test unit models card test. If you're not familiar with the syntax I put at the end of that line, punches : number, that's one of those things that was influenced by Rails. So you can actually say like attribute : type. And if we actually look at the model that was generated, you'll see that it has the attribute on it already. So it's just a nice, handy little way to define your model without having to actually open the file. So now we can open up our card, our card test. So we go test units, card test, oops, test models, sorry. Oh, go away. Test models, tests, where'd it go? Unit models, there it is, okay. This is still dark. Can you see that? No. Obviously not. Can't even find my mouse. Is it down here? Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to open up Vim because that's going to be light. Okay, so we're going to test that increments punches. So we'll say, so we get the model by this .subject, and then we can say, we don't need to get the store. We just want to say model.punch, and then equal model.punch is 1. Sound good? And we have to put ember.run around this. And I forgot to fire up the testing server, so let's do that real quick too. Oops. All right. In the right folder? Yeah. Okay. All right, so here's our test server, and it actually says 8 tests complete because it actually runs it runs JS hint as part of the testing suite. So make sure that everything passes the linter first. So now when I save this, obviously we should get a failure because we don't have a punch function yet on our model. So I'm going to go to app models card, and we're going to define punch. And thank you, Vim, for formatting that so nicely. Oh, whatever. And then we're just going to say this dot increment property punch as. And there we go. Wait, that failed. What did it get? Huh? Where? Ah, no. What do you think this is? What did I think this is? Angular? There we go. So now it passes. That's it. No configuration necessary. All right. So the last thing I wanted to show, I mentioned that you need to be able to configure it as needed, right? We have a config environment.js for feature flags for your environment config, that kind of stuff. But as of just a couple days ago, add-ons are now in master, so they'll be coming in a release soon. But thanks to a little bit of help from Rob Jackson, I'm able to actually demo add-ons today. So I want to show you. Everybody's always. How many people out there have just always wanted to write Ember in Lisp? All right, a couple people. How about we write some Ember code in Lisp? Sound good? Sibilant. Sibilant is I guess an obscure alt.js language. I honestly don't know. I don't know a whole lot about Lisp. I just thought it was kind of fun. So, but it is a Lisp dialect that compiles to JavaScript. So I'm actually going to start yeah, this is why I didn't run Vim. Okay. All right. So I can do. Actually, I need to be on master first. So let's go open up package.json. There it is. So I'm going to change this to. So I'm just going to reinstall Ember CLI from master. So while I'm waiting for that, what add-ons will give you is the ability to define additional preprocessors and the ability to define, to include assets in an NPM module. So you could have a NPM module for, I mentioned IC tabs, which is a component written by Ryan Florence to give you a tab interface. It's all using Ember component. So you could pull that in, and the add-on would actually inject the assets into your app at build time. Makes it really, really easy to do all kinds of stuff. Okay, so that's installed. So then the other thing we do is we install it's Ember CLI Sibilant, which is the plugin which is the add-on that I wrote to compile Sibilant to Ember CLI. Okay, so now I can say I can open app. We'll do a route, app routes post dot Sibilant. Oh, I need to grab one more thing. Sorry. Yeah. Where do I have that? Sorry, I got a file in another directory. I need in order for this to work. I forgot to grab it before. There we go. Okay. All right, so now we can say app routes post.sibilant. And now I can say import Ember from Ember. So I'm calling it an import macro, and I'm importing the module Ember. From the file called Ember, I'm importing the module Ember. And then I can say export default Ember ember.route.extend. And then we're going to give it a model property. And it's going to look like, it's going to get params. And we're just going to say, we're just going to return back a string just so we can have this. Actually, I don't think I need to say return. We're just going to return back a string just so we can have a simple thing to do here. And then we'll close that, close that. I think that's it. Let me just make sure that's right. Yeah, need an extra. It's Lisp, so got to make sure my parens are right. Okay, so now I can, theoretically I should be able to just say ember serve and get an error because. You got a single quote on top line. Actually, that's okay. That's part of the syntax. What I forgot to do was, no? Yeah, I know what I did. So to configure, so sometimes you need to pass options into plugins. So I need to tell it where to find my ES6 macros to be able to do the modules. So so when I say new Ember app now, I can pass in options that will be passed to the Sibilant plugin. And so I can say macros es6.sibilant. Actually, I have to, it's going to use a node requires, so I have to do that. And I think that's it. All right, so that build was successful. Oh. How about we add a route so we can actually get to that? All right. Oh, you know what? We didn't put a template in either. Sorry. So I'm just going to output the model. Obviously, in a regular development workflow, you probably just leave the server running, but, and there we go. So it's actually compiling the Sibilant code down to JavaScript just by installing one npm module. Pretty cool. So, yeah. Don't clap for me, clap for Rob and Stefan and all the guys who've been working hard on Ember CLI. I'm just presenting it. So that's pretty much the majority of it. I didn't want to. There's more in the README and there's some documentation on linked from the README. So I'd recommend checking that out. But in conclusion, if you're building a native web app, you probably want to be using Ember CLI. So thanks a lot and enjoy the rest of the show.